Benedict Arnold. At the start of the American War of Independence, he was an American hero, a brilliant general who fought bravely in several tough battles. By the end of the war, he was commanding British troops against his former forces, a general on the losing side who has gone down history as a turncoat or a traitor. He got upset by what he saw as a lack of recognition on his military genius. Arnold offered West Point to the British in return for £20,000 and proceeded to weaken the defense of the fort overlooking the Hudson River in New York State. But his plot quickly unraveled, and Arnold's contact with the British Army, Major John Andrew, was captured by American forces and hung. Arnold escaped to a British camp, and although the British never really trusted him, which is kind of funny that now the Americans don't trust him because he gave up the Hudson River and stuff, the fort there. And now the British doesn't trust him, but yet they give him command of the British troops. After the war, he and his wife went to England, where he died the most famous traitor in American history. Boom!
So he was a traitor?
Yeah.
How can someone do that?
Have you ever been betrayed by someone who has been very close to you?
Right there.
What did I do?
If so, how...
You gave another
if so, what was your reaction?
That hurt.
Okay.
Like you just
Wanting to rip his whoever.
And then you get mad, and then you want revenge, but then you don't because I'm a good person.
being silent, and then when they approach me about it, screaming in their face.
Yeah, literally, no, I'm the type of person that will try to talk about it. It's literally that was my old best friend. We got in a fight over many things, and I tried to talk to her about it, and she would not talk to me. She would ignore everything I tried to say.
Is it the
Emily?
Okay.
Yeah, and because she was dating Ramon at the time, and so when I tried to go talk to her during our free period, I was like, "Hey, can I talk to you?" She's like, "Oh, I haven't seen Ramon all day." When she was in the hallways with him and at lunch with him, stuck on his arm, and I was like, "Fine, you don't want to talk about it. You can be immature." At least I tried.
See, I was more like that, and I wanted to talk and stuff throughout junior high and high school and stuff. But the main one I was thinking about, it was just I was so mad that I stayed silent until they approached me, and then I blew up. No, I didn't punch her.
Bubba goes.
I just verbally blew up.
Alright, so tonight we're going to start a 6-week series that I've entitled Persons of the Passion. My goal for this series is that you can see the events that we celebrate at Easter as more than just, here's Christ, He died, Christ rose from the dead.
Eat some eggs.
And we can see the different people that played a role in this story. So tonight we're going to start a series by looking at the disciple that betrayed Jesus, which was?
Is it John?
No.
Hold on, no, I
Is it
don't.
Psalms?
No.
Is it Paul?
Give me a hint.
Joseph.
It does start with a J.
Oh.
The J.
Oh, nothing. James.
Wait.
No.
Judas.
Yes, thank you for...
It says it right there. I looked at it 4 times.
And we'll look at how to respond to betrayal in our own life. So how can you define being betrayed?
Backstab.
Okay.
It's like something in the pit of your stomach that just
You just
jump out and just-
your heart is just what even happened?
It's like even if it's a friend and not necessarily a guy or something, like your heart broken.
I literally she was my best friend for 3, almost 4 years, and then threw it out the window, and I was like, fine. It's I don't need you.
Yeah, and even if you say that though, whether it's your fault or their fault or both, it just breaks your heart.
And then it sucks because she won't talk about it. So I'm just like, fine, you gave up, I give up. So then I got new friends, and then I have Crystal, because she's one of my friends.
No new friends.
So the definition that comes from online is the breaking or violation of a presumed contract, trust, or confidence that produces moral and psychological conflict. within a relationship among individuals, between organizations, or between individuals and organizations.
So, like, you disobeyed a rule at work and you betrayed the ruling, and then you get fired. You get terminized.
Alright, so tonight we are going to look at 3 things. First, we're going to look at who Judas was. Then we'll look at the biblical account of Judas betraying of Jesus. We'll look at the plot against Jesus. Judas agrees to betray Jesus, the Last Supper. Then Judas and Jesus are going to come face to face at Judas' arrest, and then see how Judas responds to this.
Yeah.
And then we'll look at betrayal in today's world. So, do y'all know anything about Judas besides his name is Judas and he betrayed Jesus?
I know that he was,
He was
not
a
priest.
follower, but then
He was
he
not a
wasn't.
priest.
Okay, he was a follower, but he wasn't.
He's
Do
a
I need to answer
disciple.
this too?
He was a disciple, okay. What else?
He had a son.
I mean, he might have, if I find the Bible.
Oh. He was lynched.
He hung himself.
He lynched himself.
Alright, so he was Judean, meaning that he was the only disciple that was not from Galilee. The rest of them, so he was kind of an outsider compared to the other disciples. Ironically, Judas means praise to the Lord. The name Judas does. And so back in biblical times, this was a name that a lot of people would name their kids. So there was a lot of Judases around. But then what happened is you get Judas that betrays Jesus, and all of a sudden no one wants to name their kid Judas.
Oh,
And
really?
so, yeah. And so I think it's like
I actually
John.
know one guy that's name is Judas,
I bet
and
that
people
guy
make fun of him.
would be like,
And then I think it turned to where John and someone else, I can't remember who, kind of became the popular name instead of Judas.
yeah, there's a lot of James and John.
There's a butt ton.
So yeah, you had all these Judases, even the Bible talks about more than one Judas, and then all of a sudden Judas betrays Jesus, and it's like, oh,
Can't name
Not
that.
even though it has this like amazing like meaning of praise to the Lord, it's all of a sudden like, oh, yeah, don't live up to that name.
We'll have a bad fortune with that. I don't want that.
So he was given an opportunity of leadership by Jesus as part of the 12 disciples. He was actually the treasurer of the disciples.
So he was like a big part of it.
Yeah, they all had different like roles, and his role was to be the treasurer, which what they think is
He's got the money.
the reason he decided to follow Jesus is this hope that Jesus was going to come. Like a lot of Jews had this view that Jesus was going to come, he's going to destroy the Roman Empire, he'll take over the kingdom of earth, the kingdom of heaven will be on earth now. And so what Judas thought is, okay, I'll be the treasurer for Jesus as his disciples. Then he goes over and takes out the Roman Empire, and now I'm the treasurer of the whole world. And so I'm in charge of the money for the whole world. So he definitely thought about his plan of wanting to follow Jesus.
Yeah, he was money first.
Yeah.
Like I said a little bit ago, he was called a traitor. People do not think he was a quote-unquote Christian. The reason I say quote-unquote is because they wasn't Christians. But what they believe is that even though he was a disciple of Christ, he really didn't believe what Jesus was teaching and doing. But rather he was in it and following Jesus
For the money.
to get something out of it. Which you'll see money playing a part of his betrayal of Jesus. So what do people call Christians today who say one thing and do something else?
Backstabbers. Liars.
Okay.
It's another word.
Starts with an H.
An H. Or you,
Wait, can I have a second letter?
what's the last letter?
Why?
Ask the question
Hypocrite.
again and yeah.
I
So
was
it's like,
like,
don't get it. Just ask
I was like, why?
So we can see Judas as a hypocrite for what kind of being seen as this follower of Jesus, but really not. And he was a man that no one intended to follow. Not someone the people would look up and say, "Oh, I'm going to find a role model in the Bible, and it's going to be Judas." That's
the guy.
his life.
That's who I want.
I'm gonna live up to his
I'd be like
expectations. I want the money.
All right, so we have this understanding as Christians that God is omniscient, meaning that He knows everything that's going to happen, which means that Jesus knew that Judas was going to betray Him before Judas became one of His disciples. And so for a lot of people, it brings up this question of why did if Jesus knew that Judas was going to do this, why even let Judas follow Him and be one of the 12? The reason is, and this may sound like super cliche or a Sunday school answer, but it's all because of God's plan. It's God's fulfilling of what the account that even Jesus is kind of telling the disciples a few times when He's talking about these predicting His death. He's saying, "One of you are going to betray me." And when we look at the Last Supper in a little bit, we'll see Him even give an even deeper account of who's going to betray Him.
He's sitting right next to me.
So now that we have some background on Judas and why Jesus still picked Judas, we can look at the biblical account of Judas betraying Jesus. The first thing we have is we have the plot against Jesus. We're going to be in Matthew 26 tonight. We're going to start in verses 1 through 5. So when Jesus had finished saying all these things, He said to the disciples, "As you know, the Passover is 2 days away, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified." Then the chief priests and elders of the people assembled in the palace of the high priest, and they schemed to arrest Jesus secretly and kill Him, but not during the festival. They said, "Or there may be riots among the people."
26.
And so what we have is Jesus has entered Jerusalem. He's doing all this teaching. He teaches kind of about the end times. He talked about these couple of parables. And once he's done talking to the crowd, he turns to the disciples and said, "Okay, this Passover feast is about to start. And at this point, this is where they're going to come, and I'm going to be handed over to be crucified." And kind of this handed over meaning that someone's going to have to give Him up, that someone's going to have to betray Him. And so now you have these, in the palace, you have these chief priests and the elders of the people. They're talking, trying to figure out, okay, how can we do this? Because, yes, we're going to have this Passover feast, but that means that there's going to be hundreds of thousands of more people in Jerusalem than there would have been on a normal day. And so they got to figure out how to do it where it's not in front of a whole bunch of people that are all of a sudden going to riot against them, and Jesus can get away. They got to figure out a time that they can do it in a secret place. And so now we have where Judas agrees to betray Jesus. What we have between these two sections, we have the story where Jesus kind of gets anointed, and he's out at a house outside of Jerusalem, and this woman comes up and decides that she wants to anoint Jesus with some expensive perfume. And now the disciples, which a lot of people believe this is Judas kind of starting to kind of pull away from the other disciples and start trying to question what Jesus is doing, and kind of gets onto the woman like, "Okay, why are you wasting this perfume on Him? Like, this is an expensive perfume that you could sell and give to the poor, and yet you're giving it to you're pouring it on Jesus." And so Jesus kind of gets him in trouble for saying this, and saying that she understands the gospel better than they do, and so it moves on. And apparently, the reason people believe that this is probably Judas that gets in trouble and did all this is because then the next story you have is Judas leaving. It's starting in verse 14 through 16. It says, "Then one of the 12, the one called Judas, went to the chief priests and asked, 'What are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you?' So they counted out for him 30 pieces of silver. From then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over." So it's kind of like Judas, kind of that last straw that, like, oh, this guy, I don't think he's going to do, form this earthly kingdom and defeat the Romans. So I'm going to decide that I'm going to give him up. I'm going to go to the chief priest. I don't know if Matthew talks about it, but there's one where they approached Judas beforehand, and or he approached them beforehand. I can't remember which one. And they kind of start talking about it. He kind of turns them down, says he'll kind of think about it. And so then you got this story where he kind of goes back to the chief priest and is like, "Look, I'll do it. I'm willing to give him over to you. I will deliver him." And what he does is he gives them or is told that they'll give him 30 pieces of silver. Does that sound like a lot of money?
No.
It's not. Even what it was seen as slaves in that time that were sold cost more than what they gave for Jesus.
Wow.
And so what they're saying is that Jesus is worth less than a slave.
Wow.
And something else that kind of made this kind of shows about Judas's heart. If he begins to question, this question of what will you give for me? It shows his selfish heart, and his motive is revealed that he wanted the money. This is all he was in for. Was trying to get money out of it, because every time the disciples would people would give the disciples money, Jesus would then give it to other people. And Jesus didn't like this. He even thought that when Jesus performs miracles or healings or signs, that he should charge people for it, that they should have to pay to have their miracle done. And so this makes Jesus mad. He finally gets to the point where he's saying, look, I'll give it to him. No matter the price, even if you're only going to give me 30 pieces of silver, I'll do it. And so now he's kind of goes back to the disciples and kind of waiting for that time that he can go away and then come back and have Jesus arrested. So let me get to the story of the Last Supper. And so verse 17. On the first day of the festival of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, where do you want us to make preparations for you to eat the Passover? He replied, go into the city to a certain man and tell him, the teacher says, my appointed time is near. I am going to celebrate the Passover with my disciples at your house. So the disciples did just as Jesus had directed them and prepared the Passover. When evening came, Jesus was reclining at the table with the 12. And while they were eating, he said, truly I tell you, one of you will betray me. They were very sad and began to say to one another after the other, surely you don't mean me, Lord. Jesus replied, the one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him. But woe to that man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born. Then Judas, the one who would betray him, said, surely you don't mean me, Rabbi. Jesus answered, you have said so. And then he goes on to do the Lord's Supper. So you have the disciples, Jesus is sitting at this table and say, look, one of you at this table is going to betray me. And they're all kind of like,
Me? Is it me? Me?
and most likely Peter, who we'll look at next week, is probably the loudest one. Because Peter was so convinced that, I'm not going to do it, Lord. Like, it's not me. I'm Peter. Which we're going to look at Peter next week, or 2 weeks, I think. And Peter, Peter goes kind of on the stairwell of, oh, good job, Peter. Oh, Peter, what were you thinking? It kind of is up and down, like, good Peter, bad Peter, good Peter, bad Peter. And so they're all kind of sitting around this table saying, it's not going to be me. I'm not going to do it.
And then Peter's like, it's not me.
And so Jesus plainly tells them, look, the one that dips his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. And Judas, even though Judas knows he's going to do it, it tells us the one who's going to betray us is like,
No.
surely you don't mean me, Rabbi. Like, someone else has already agreed that he's going to betray Jesus too. Like, all the disciples have gone around trying to betray Jesus. Because Jesus tells them off twice. It's like, but woe to that man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born. And then Judas is like, not me.
I mean, I didn't.
And then he's like, you have said so. Like, too late. You've already done it. Like, you've already paid for me to be betrayed. You already know what you've done. So now they've had this dinner together. Jesus has told them who is going to betray them, and so they get to this. They get to the garden, and then you got Jesus predicting Peter's denial, which we'll look at in a couple of weeks when we get to Peter. So then you get to the garden, and they go into the garden, and they start. Jesus takes his time to pray. He takes Peter and James and John with him up kind of farther on, leaves the other disciples behind. And so he goes and prays to God, and he leaves the rest of the disciples here. He takes James, John, and Peter, but then he leaves them here, and he goes a little bit farther and prays, asking the Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken away from me, yet not as I will, but as you. And you kind of see this fear of Jesus, but then he comes back, and good old Peter, James, and John are asleep, which we'll look at John 2 in a couple weeks. And so he wakes them up and all this stuff. And so then he goes back and prays again. He comes back and they're asleep again. And so then he goes away one more time. And then he comes back and he tells them, are you still sleeping and resting? And he's like, look, the hour has come. The Son of Man is delivered into the hands of the sinners. Rise up, let's go. Here comes my betrayer. So he kind of comes back to them, sees that they're asleep, in the distance sees them coming with their torches and stuff, sees them coming at him, and so he knows the time has come, and so he's ready for this to happen. Now here's Judas is kind of coming in and probably expecting, especially because he probably still has somewhat of a view that Jesus is going to kind of take down the Roman Empire. And so what he's thinking is that once he approaches Jesus, Jesus is going to call down these heavenly forces, and we're going to have like this epic battle scene between the people trying to arrest Jesus and these heavenly forces. And then Jesus is going to demonstrate his power. He's going to kill all these men, probably kill Judas in the process. And then Jesus is just going to kind of walk away into the sunset.
Just like, and that was like this big giant explosion when he walked away.
So then starting in verse 47, it says, while they were still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him a huge crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. The one I kiss is a man, arrest him. Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, greetings, Rabbi, and kissed him.
Oh wait, on the lips?
Probably not. I mean, it could have been, but I mean, kind of think of the French. They kiss on the cheek as like a greeting and stuff, and it's not weird.
Well, I mean, like,
I mean, it wasn't. I know it seems weird, and it's two guys and everything, but it wasn't weird back then. It was just a sign of like a hug. I mean, it wasn't as big a deal. It was like a hug.
If they still did that today, I would hate it. Give me a hug.
I mean, it's not like an intimate kiss. It's just,
hey, I want to trade you.
Greetings, like.
And this is my favorite part. You got Judas thinking, okay, heavenly forces, Jesus attacks, destroys them, and yet Jesus kind of replies, do what you have come for, friend. And so he still refers to Judas as a friend, and this is really when Judas kind of gets pushed back of kind of, oh crap, what have I done? And we'll look at that more when we get to Judas' response.
Gets off his shoulder. I'm just like, oh.
And so then the man stepped forward and seized Jesus and arrested him. And then we'll talk about this story. This is probably one of my favorite stories of Peter. When Peter, well, I'm saying Peter. The Bible doesn't say it was Peter. But steps forward, draws out his sword, and like cuts off one of the soldier's ear. And then Jesus like takes it and like kills it. But, so you have Judas kind of being pushed back of, whoa, he called me friend. He didn't send down no heavenly forces. Pretty much just said, do what you've come to do. And so then Judas is going to respond to this in chapter 27, starting in verse 3. When Judas, who had betrayed him, saw that Jesus was condemned, and was seized with remorse, and returned with 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders. So he sees probably out in the crowd and sees that Jesus has been condemned. Jesus is going to be put to death. And most likely going to be put to death. He's gone through some beatings and stuff. And so he's feeling pretty upset. And so he goes back to the chief priests and he hands them 30 pieces of silver and says, I have sinned, for I have betrayed innocent blood. Now people kind of wrestle back and forth with this, as meaning, okay, he kind of was asking for repentance. He's kind of understood that what he did was wrong. But then there's other people that see it as just kind of, oh, I got caught. Like it didn't go how I planned it to go. And so that's why he is upset. And so then they reply, what is that to us? That's your responsibility. So Judas threw the money into the temple and left. Then he went away and hung himself. The chief priest picked up the coins and said, it is against the law to put this into the treasury since it's blood money. So they decided to use the money to buy the potter's field as a burial place for foreigners. That is why it has been called the field of blood to this day. Which it's like, okay, we'll give this money. It's okay for us to give you this 30 pieces of silver so that you can go and have Jesus and help us kill Jesus. But if you try to give us back the money, we can't put it with our other money because now it has, you killed somebody with it. And so instead, we're going to buy this piece of field where when we kill other people, we can bury them. So you have this Judas who's, when Jesus calls him friend, sin changes. And sin is seen as, oh, I've actually done something, my plan has not worked, or, I've done something wrong. And so he feels a lot of remorse. And it could have been that he was scared that the disciples would come after him after Jesus had died and try to kill him. There's many things out there, but what we see is that he betrayed Jesus. This guy that Jesus had chose to be one of his 12, that walked with Christ, had seen him do all these things, still chose to betray Jesus for a mere 30 pieces of silver. So how do we respond to betrayal today? First is to cry out to Jesus. He loves us, he pursues us, and more importantly, he understands the reality of being betrayed. I mean, he faced it himself. So running to him and trusting in him and crying out to him of saying, help me through this. Help me, show me what to be able to do. The second thing comes from Romans 12. It's this really interesting passage that Paul writes. He's kind of talking about love in action, loving others, and that love must be true and everything. He gives this passage and he says, if your enemy is hungry, feed them. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. So what it's kind of saying is, if your response, what were you going to say?
I was like killing kindness.
Yeah. This is kind of, they expect you to respond with kind of anger or hatred and stuff. But he's saying, you do all these things for them, and they're like, wait, who's the bad guy now? I mean, they see them kind of this self of
unless they ignore you.
Wish I could, but it's still kind of.
You're still showing kindness to them.
It kind of pushes them back a little bit of, wait, what? I was so mean to you, and yet now you're being nice to me? Wait, there's something wrong with this. And so what you see is that you overcome evil with good. Not being overcome by evil, not letting it attack you.
Side note with that is that doesn't mean that you can do it sarcastically. I don't know, the first thing that comes to mind is that I used to work at a grocery store, and this woman came in really angry and was just screaming, yelling at everyone. And so they had me take her groceries out because I was the only one she hadn't screamed at that point. And so I took them out to her and stuff, and I knew that I had to be super kind, and so I just said, I hope you have a great day and come back and see us. And she thought I was being sarcastic. And so she went and complained on me, which I didn't get in trouble. But I wasn't being sarcastic. But, sarcasm, though, if you are being sarcastic, it doesn't get you in there. It's just going to make them more mad. It's not truly being kind.
Third, show them the love of Christ. Kind of the same thing that this verse talked about. And number 4 is let them know that they've done wrong to you. Kind of talk to them about it. Let them know, what you did to me, that wasn't kind. That wasn't respectful. That was wrong with what you've done to me.
And that step will come easier once you do the other two. If you're kind to them first, and just kind of show them that you can be kind even though they were hurtful towards you, it will be easier to talk to them instead of, and I mean, I'm guilty of this too, especially when I was in high school, y'all's age and everything, all the girl drama, but if you're kind to them first, you're killing them with kindness, that would be so much easier to later be able to say, you really hurt me when you did XYZ, instead of right after it happened, I can't believe you did that to me! And, like screaming at them. I mean,
Scream at her.
well, even if you say it nicely, like if it just happened, just walking up to them and, I can't believe you did that to me, or I can't believe you said that, or whatever, it's gonna come easier if first you do the other two steps and you kill them with kindness.
All right, any comments, questions? All right, let's pray.